Welcome to the Cybertraps podcast presented by the Center for Cyberethics. I'm Jethro Jones coming to you from Washington, host of the podcast Transformative Principal and author of the book School X How to Redesign Your School for the People Right in Front of You. I am a former principal at all levels of K 12 education.
Greetings, everyone. I'm Frederick Lane, an author, attorney, and educational consultant based in New York. I'm the author of 10 books, including most recently Cybertraps for Educators 2.0, Raising Cyberethical Kids, and Cybertraps for Expecting Moms and Dads. Jethro and I have teamed up to bring timely, entertaining, and useful information to teachers, parents, and others about the risks arising from the use and misuse of digital devices.
Over the coming weeks and months, we'll be talking with some of the world's leading experts from the fields of education, parenting, sociology, and cyber safety. Join us as we look at what it takes to better navigate our increasingly high tech world.
And now it's our opportunity to give a shout out to our inaugural mission partner. Buoyancy Digital is proud to be the inaugural mission partner for the Cybertraps podcast series, a digital advertising consultancy with an ethos. Buoyancy was founded by Scott Rabinowitz, who has been in digital media since 1997 and has overseen 300 million in youth safety compliant ad buys across all digital platforms. For IAB, Google, and Bing accredited brand and audience safe advertising sales solutions, media buying, and organizational training for media publishers, give them a call. For more information on working with Scott and Buoyancy Digital, visit buoyancydigital.com or at Scott R Media on LinkedIn. Hey there, Jethro.
Hello, good to see you. Sorry we're a little late today.
As I like to say, tech happens. So,
Oh boy, does it. Does it indeed.
well, it's good to get ourselves underway. We've got an interesting show here on the concept of digital hygiene.
Yeah, and I'm actually excited about this because I think digital hygiene is one of those things that we think about and talk about very little compared to how much we should. So, first of all, what is digital hygiene? It is the practice of cleaning up your electronic information assets and regularly updating them. And how often do you think about that, Fred?
Not often enough is the answer to that. As you know, it was interesting as I was preparing for this show. I was kind of grading myself on the different things that we're going to be talking about,
Yeah.
and there's some stuff I feel okay about, and then there's some other stuff that, maybe I need to up the game a little bit. And in the interest of full disclosure, I'll talk about those as we go through today.
Yeah, for sure. I did the same thing and I was like, man, I have about in my password managers, this is one thing. I have a ton of websites that say this is a security breach or a reused password, and I just haven't ever been able, to overcome that and get that stuff taken care of. So
Well, I
I'm
have
right
a
there with you.
suggestion. Well, I think we're in parallel on that. But I actually think that I have a suggestion that will help all of us out when we get to that section of the show today. So we'll work on that. But I think one of the things that's useful is to let people who are listening to this know that this is a lead-in to episode 25 of the Cybertraps podcast, which features an interview with a Navy officer, Brandon Karpf, who has years of experience in cybersecurity. And during the course of that interview, I was really struck by his idea that cybersecurity is really the responsibility of all of us. And we tend to think of things that take cybersecurity in the concept or context of national security or organizational security. But one of the things that I thought he did a really great job with is helping to explain how the actions we all take as individuals can affect those much bigger forms of cybersecurity.
Yeah, absolutely. When we recognize that it's the responsibility of all of us, then it changes how we approach things, and especially if you work in a company or with a group of other people where you're all taking, have access to sensitive data. If you don't all see it as something that we need to do together, then that's going to be really challenging to keep everybody safe. So I appreciate that, and I think that that is really quite important. The first
Well,
topic. Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say it's just a great observation with which to start. So over to you.
Okay, officially, we'll get started. So we're gonna start by talking about password managers because as we talk to people, one of the things they say is the most important thing you can do is have a good password that you use for a specific website. Now, what they don't say is to have that one good password and use it everywhere, because if one place gets breached, then every place else gets breached. So let's talk first about strong passwords and what that means.
Yeah, I mean, a strong password is pretty much self-explanatory, right? It's a password that is robust enough to make it very difficult for someone to break into your account. Maybe the best way to explain this is that, for a long time, I think until we started to get more sophisticated about this, people would use simple passwords that were, words that could be found in a dictionary, or that were repetitions of given characters, something ridiculous like 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8, or a
Mhm.
series of ones or something like that. And actually, increasingly, websites won't let you do that because they're just inherently weak passwords. The point about having a password that mixes symbols and numbers into letters is that one of the tools that hackers frequently use is the so-called dictionary attack, where they use high-speed computers to just try every word in the dictionary to see if they can get into a given user account. And so, the way you avoid that is twofold. Either you use a mixture of symbols and numbers, as we said, or you use multiple words for a given website, and that just elevates the number of combinations that a hacker would have to try in order to break into your account.
Mhm.
So this sounds very complicated, and yeah, we're not innately designed to remember hundreds of passwords, different passwords for all the websites we use. So what do we turn to? We turn to software like password managers to help us handle this problem.
Mhm. And that's where we're gonna share our favorite password managers right here. Um, Mine is one password, and yours is Dashlane. And really, you need to think about a couple different things here. One, do you trust the company who's managing your passwords to keep it safe? So that's really important. And number two, is it easy to use? If you have a password that is 20 characters long, has capitals, lower cases, special characters, and uh, is and doesn't make any sense at all, you need to be able to access that quickly because you're not going to be able to remember it. So you've got to be able to have it be an ease of use, but also something that is secure. So as I mentioned, my favorite one is one password. I've been using that for years, and it is actively developed. It's always being updated, and they're adding new features that tell you when there's a weak password, for example, or tell you when something has been um, there's been a data breach. And so, like, this company has announced something, they notify you in the password manager that that is something that needs to change. And to be honest, you don't always get those notifications that something has changed, and some companies even fail to notify their customers that those things have changed. And what I like about one password especially is that it works on all my devices, and I could even access it through the website if I need to, so that I don't have to. If I'm on somebody else's computer, I can still get to my secure passwords, and it's not so challenging that I'm never going to be able to do it.
Yeah, that's a really big thing, is that if the software you're using to manage your passwords is more complicated than remembering the passwords, that's a problem.
Hmm.
So I feel the same way about Dashlane. I've been using that for years as well. The thing that everybody should remember is that the way the reputable password managers work is that they encrypt your passwords on their service. So the point of that is that they can't retrieve your passwords if you forget the master password that you need to get into the program. So, basically, the goal here is for each of us to only have to remember one password. the one password that gets you into your password manager. It's, there's that old adage about not putting all of your eggs in one basket. Well, the corollary to that is if you're going to do that, just watch that basket really well.
Yeah, exactly.
So the goal is, make sure that you know your one master password, put it somewhere safe. In terms of digital hygiene, right? This idea that we're going to clean up our electronic environment. At the top of the show, we were talking about, well, what can we do to actually make things better? And like you, I've got a bunch of old websites that I don't have active accounts on. Those are security risks because, again, if there's a reused password or something like that, you're just as vulnerable as if you're using it every day. And
Mhm.
then, yeah, I definitely have some repetitious use of passwords that I need to straighten out. So, the goal would be small bites. I think probably what I should resolve to do, and this is very much like our guest Josh Spodek, right? You make these small concrete steps every day. So if you go in and you clean up 3 passwords a day, either delete an account or change the password to something more secure, make sure there's no repetition, you know, in 2, 3 months, you're probably going to have a much cleaner password setup. So
Mhm.
that's what I will try to do.
Yeah, and I think that that's a good strategy to do it. And I have 2,081 items in mine,
Okay,
so
you might have to do more.
I might have to do more than 3 per day. But the good thing is that because I have this database of everything there, I have every password pretty much that I've ever created, and that's what I think is so amazing is that all these old sites that I don't use anymore, I know what the password is and I can get into them, and that makes it really handy to be able to, you know, find my stuff when I need it. Strong recommendation to get a password manager. One Password and Dashlane are just two of them. And to be clear, they're not sponsoring this podcast. Though if they want to, we can certainly talk about that. But that's something where we use them because they are so important and so powerful, and they are worth an investment in them to keep your identity and everything else safe.
And
So, but
one
yeah,
quick last note on that, Jethro. I don't know if this is something you've set up, but Dashlane at least allows you to designate somebody to get access to your passwords if anything happens to you. So that's something, for instance, I've been able to do with Amy, is that if she ever needed to get access to my passwords, she can.
yeah. And so what we actually have set up with One Password is a family plan, which is another benefit is that I can now have everybody in my family be part of my One Password, and I can share specific passwords with them. And I have different vaults, one for each member of my family, and then they can access their stuff. And then my wife is also an administrator on that, so um, she can access that herself as well and change the kids' passwords and things like that too. And then last thing on that, and then we'll really move on this time, is um, have a piece of paper or something physical that you can put in your safety deposit box or someplace else where you keep important documents that tells how to get into this, so that if something happens to you, then your family is not left, with bills continuing to come out of certain accounts, and they can go in and make all those changes. So that's a like an emergency um, file or something like that you can have just in case you ever need something like that, and have that printed out somewhere set up where you can't really get access to it unless you have access to everything else in your life. So put that somewhere very safe for sure. So moving on, we'll talk about avoiding malware, things like viruses, keyloggers, ransomware, and rats. I don't even know what rats are. What are you talking about there, Fred?
Rat is something that popped up in my Cybertraps for the Young research and more recently in some of the privacy work. It's a remote access terminal software program,
Thank
and
you.
these get deployed on particularly laptops and are used to activate the camera without the permission of the person actually using the computer. Yeah, this is a really popular way to harass people sometimes leads to sextortion because photos get taken and then there's the threat of disclosure of the photos and so on and so forth. So
Mhm.
it's just a form of unauthorized access to the computer that you want to make sure your anti-malware software is up to speed on.
Yeah, so a few pieces of advice from this section of avoiding malware is one, minimize your downloads and know where you're downloading from. And just because they're one thing you have to recognize is that anytime you browse a website, you're downloading something to your computer. And so there are things that get downloaded automatically as you view a website, but then there's things that you actually download. And most modern web browsers come with something that says, do you want to allow a download from this particular website? And that is where it's downloading something not to the cache of the computer, but actually to your like downloads folder, for example, a file onto your computer separate from just the data that you load onto your computer as you're browsing the web.
Yeah, I think, this is a good opportunity to remind people that there's a real importance to checking the security settings on your browser and understanding how they work. In most cases, if you go to the upper right corner of your browser, there's either a little hamburger symbol, the three lines stacked above each other. You could call that the software stack or whatever you want to call it. Or there's a little gear icon for settings. Click on that, go into the security box for your browser. And if you don't understand something that's in that security section, do a little work on Bing or Google or whatever to familiarize yourself with it, just to make sure that the security settings are as high as you can put them. Obviously, the most secure browser is one that doesn't go online. So there's a limit to how secure that these things can be. But at the same time, you can make sure that the browser is preventing things from happening without your knowledge and your consent.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and on that, as you get emails, phishing emails is something that we talk about frequently about people trying to get information from you or take you to a website where you can download something or log into the wrong website. As you're looking at your browser, your URL bar, where the website is that you're actually on, you want to see if there's a little lock icon, which means that it is a secure website, and that can be uh, inappropriate websites can be secured as well. But then also make sure that you know the address that you're going to. So if you bank with Wells Fargo, for example, and it is wellsfargo.scam.com, you're on the Wells Fargo website. So also look at the spelling and just make it a habit to look at where you're actually going and pay attention to that because it's funny right now, but it's not funny when you actually go to someplace. In fact, I have a good story about this. Just gosh, when was it? Was it Friday? Just Friday, I got an email from a school, and I do consulting with schools. And the email it said, "Hey, please see this invoice and follow up on it." And so I thought, oh, somebody wants to pay me some money to do consulting with their school. I'm pretty excited about that. I should definitely do something to ensure that I get paid from these people. However, it was a school district that I had not done anything with ever before, and I never heard of them. And somehow they had my email address in their system, which I thought was strange to begin with. And so what I got from them was this email saying, "Please pay," and I'm going to show it here for sake of posterity, so that people um, can see. Oh, that didn't come out very well, so maybe I'll take that off. Um, anyway, oh, let me take it all the way off. So what they said was, "Please pay this invoice," and I'll read it to you so you can hear it. "Kindly give your comment on the attached. Thanks." And then it was invoice dot three or 3.11.2020. So the year was wrong, first of all, and then it was .html. So thankfully, my email system, made it look different than a regular PDF would look so that I'd be able to see it. But if I didn't pay attention, it would be really easy to just click that and download something onto my computer, and then I'd be in trouble. So paying attention to those things is really important. You want to make sure that you do that.
Well, and as I've mentioned in other episodes, my wife Amy gets these periodic training programs from the Fashion Institute of Technology where she teaches, and I've sat in on the last couple that she's done. They're actually produced by the company with which either Kevin Mitnick consults or he co-founded. But in any case, famous hacker turned white hat now teaches people how to avoid phishing
Hmm.
things, and that's actually one of the most important things to remind people is that not only do you need to look at the links and make sure they don't say .scam.org, which would be like the least successful hacker ever, but you also need to hover over a URL that's in an email because it's perfectly easy to put a URL in the email that says one thing, but then actually goes to a different destination when you click on it. So, as we have said so many different times, the key is to taking your time and use critical thinking when you see something. Don't just plunge in. Take a deep breath, wait a couple of beats, make sure you understand what you're actually doing.
Hmm. Oops. Sorry.
No,
And
that's all
taking the
right.
time taking the time to do that is definitely worthwhile.
Yeah.
Finally, have some pop-up blockers, maybe consider some ad blockers, different things to make sure that you're being safe. There are several different web browsers out there. You don't just have to use what comes on your computer. There's also Firefox, of which Fred is a big fan. I'm a big fan of the Brave browser. And there are lots of other ones. Opera is another one. But make sure that you're using different kinds of web browsers to help you stay safe as well.
And the
Um,
last piece on that, actually, Jethro, if I can, is that in terms of the software that you need, when I know that when I first started really getting into the World Wide Web and so forth, the anti-malware stuff was typically a third-party program that you'd have to go out and research, whether it was Norton or McAfee or something like that. Um, Over the years, I want to give a shout out to both Apple and Microsoft because
for
they
sure.
have finally developed really effective antivirus, anti-malware software that's built into the operating systems. And so, for the vast majority of people who are listening to this, there's no need, McAfee's going to love this, there's no need to go out and get a separate antivirus program or an anti-malware program. Just make sure that your settings for instance, Windows Defender are properly configured, that the program is running, and you should generally be fine.
Hmm. And you can use a firewall built into the Mac OS operating system as well, and that is there by default. So you don't have to do anything special to do that. You just have to turn it on because it's not on by default. And then there are different things you can do, like encrypt your hard drive using File Vault, which is a Mac OS thing. So those are great pieces of advice, and just look around and see what is in there, and that is a good place to start. Um, Moving on, our uh, and then by extension, you want to make sure you keep your operating system updated, and
That's
because
a
that's where the security comes in. So,
well, that
uh,
is the thing. I mean, it is amazing. Even in this day and age, these operating systems will sometimes, leave holes. There are
mhm,
updates that take place, and they're constantly trying to keep up with the patches needed to make these things as secure as possible. And it is important to underscore how profoundly complex all of this software is. I mean, the fact that it works as well as it does is a minor miracle. But, as our guest on Thursday pointed out, the people who are trying to get into our systems only have to succeed once. If you want to keep them out, you have to succeed all the time. And it's a
mhm,
very disproportionate system.
yeah, very not fair to us, but
But
that's all right.
crime never has been fair. So there you go.
No, certainly not. So, we want you to also practice safe surfing. And that is the other thing. There are a few things out there that you can do. Avoid using public or open Wi-Fi connections without protection. And then we'll have some links in the show notes to a bunch of different resources to help with this. But one of those things that we're going to talk, I think, the rest of the time about is a virtual private network. So, Fred, will you just define what a virtual private network is and help us understand a VPN?
Sure. Virtual private network. You can pretty much break down the words, and it's relatively logical. But according to the technology company Cisco, the definition that they provide is that a virtual private network, or VPN, is an encrypted connection over the internet from a device to a network. The encrypted connection helps to ensure that sensitive data is safely transmitted, and it prevents unauthorized people from eavesdropping on the traffic and allows the user to conduct work remotely. So basically, the idea here is that if I go into a Starbucks, I'm using an open Wi-Fi system that Starbucks runs. They actually teamed up with Google to provide that service, frankly, all over the world. I've sat in some very obscure Starbucks and actually gotten work done, which is fabulous. But the problem is that it is relatively easy to eavesdrop on Wi-Fi traffic that takes place in such situations, and that the data and your keystrokes can be captured by someone who's eavesdropping on that connection. Now, the point of the virtual private network is that you use software on your device that encrypts your communication before it leaves your laptop. So then it's traveling over the open Wi-Fi in an encrypted fashion, and then it gets unencrypted when it reaches the servers of the virtual private network, and then gets transmitted to its destination. So the very first question you have to ask yourself is, if I'm going to use a virtual private network, which we strongly recommend, then what do you know about the company that is providing that service? How much do you trust them in terms of handling your information?
Hmm. And this piece is really challenging because there so many websites are so difficult to get information from.
Mm.
And my father-in-law actually asked me a while ago what I use, and I went to um, I went to a website called safetydetectives.com, and there is a VPN
Mm.
comparison chart by that one privacy guy. So it that I found to be a very very detailed and very like descriptive example of how to choose something. And my father-in-law, who's a super detail-oriented person and very thoughtful in what he does, went on there and was able to find the one that I was using, and he said, "Well, Jethro, it doesn't look like yours is the best one out there." Of course, my father-in-law would say that. And so I was able to go in and do some more research and see some things. And the reality is you're not going to find the perfect, like, there's always going to be something that is a challenge or something that's not perfect about it. And so you want to look for the things that are important to you. Privacy may be important than their technical abilities, or their business practices might be more important than something else. And those are the three areas that they're ranked on. And what I really appreciate about this chart was that that again, that's safetydetectives.com slash best hyphen VPNs. So you can find that. And I'll put the links to that in the show notes at cybertraps.com so that you can go and see it yourself. But what I really appreciate about it is that it tends to give a pretty honest view of those different things and helps you make some choices that they've done a lot of the research for you. And so you have to, again, ask, do you trust the research that they've done? And are they leaning a certain way? And from what I could tell, it doesn't look like they are, but it's important to look at those things. And one notable exception from that's not on that list is Mozilla VPN, which I think we talked about last week, and
Mhm.
associated with the Firefox web browser, the Mozilla Foundation, and they're very big on privacy, so they would be a good one to look at.
Well, I just took a quick glance at that page while you were explaining it, Jethro, and scrolled down, and have to say I'm relatively pleased that the VPN that I used over in England came up with pretty good marks.
Okay.
So again, not a sponsor, but I was using NordVPN. I found it to be very easy to use. It works on your mobile devices as well as on your laptop or desktop. So that might be one to take a look at. Couple of other things about a VPN. I mean, it can be a little bit frustrating because there's a performance penalty that's involved in using a VPN. And one of the things that these companies do is that they try to optimize their software to minimize that. But there's going to be a little bit more of a delay because you have to encrypt the traffic. You're going through one or more servers en route to the destination.
Hmm.
And so there, you may find that some things don't work quite as quickly, but you're trading that for security. The other thing I will say, in the interest of full disclosure, is that I wanted to keep up with a lot of things back here in the United States. And sometimes I was not able to log in from England to American websites for one reason or another. And one of the things that a VPN does is that it allows you to choose the geographic location of the server you're using. So it was relatively straightforward for me to pick a New York server. And to the United States website, it looked like I was based in New York.
Hmm.
So just point of information for people.
Yeah, and that's important also that you understand that uh, if you're starting to see something funky, it might be because the server that you're accessing through is located in a different country, and so that could be a thing that you should just pay attention to. So as I mentioned, we'll put some links to that kind of stuff in the show notes so that you have more information about how to make these choices. There's a great article from Popular Mechanics, and what they say on there is, and I love this, that a good VPN costs money, full stop. If you are not paying for the VPN, then you're paying for it with some other thing besides your money, which is likely your privacy, your browsing data, whatever the case may be. So pay attention to that and make sure that you're aware of what you're doing. And then finally, our last thing that we talk about nearly every single episode, it seems, is you've got to have some critical thinking. You got to be able to make choices on your own and make some smart choices.
Well, and just evaluate what you're doing, and more than anything else, and honestly, we need to turn this into a t-shirt. Take the time to think about what you're doing.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Think before you post. I think that's a think before you use the internet, I think, is what we need to do there.
Here, here. Alrighty. Well, that wraps up this episode of the Cybertraps podcast. In the coming weeks, we will continue our coverage of emerging trends in a variety of areas, including digital misconduct, cyber safety, cybersecurity, privacy, and the challenges of high tech parenting. Along the way, we'll talk to our growing collection of international experts who are helping us to understand the risks and rewards of digital technology.
You can find the Cybertraps podcast on all your favorite podcast apps. We hope that you'll share the show with your friends and colleagues and reach out to us if you have questions or topic suggestions. If you'd like to follow us on Twitter, I'm at Jethro Jones and Fred is at Cybertraps. And if you're still listening, you must have enjoyed this show. Please leave us a 5-star rating and review in your podcast service of choice. Thanks for being here, and we'll see you on Thursday for our interview with Brandon Karp.